Late night, flickering lights.
Basically, I expected a cup of Starbucks coffee. Accessible, but hard to fall in love with.
There's a fight, sirens drive.
And since we're talking adventure bikes, it's kind of fitting. I got to spend almost a week with the KTM 790 Adventure, and my expectations weren't far from the truth, with a few caveats.
It's tough to fall in love with the 790. In a sense, for every 2 steps it takes forward, it also takes a step back.
The suspension, for example, it's different than a Tenere and fairly compliant, but a bit rough around the edges at times. It's definitely not worse than its Japanese counterpart, but it has its quirks too.
Street riding can be super fun with an easy to control clutch. But that same clutch becomes a bit of a pain to pull off the road with less than 2 fingers. The ergonomics suit canyon carving really well, but at the same time can feel a bit too lean forward for off-road usage.
Then you have the engine. Super happy to stay high in the revs, it lives and breathes above 5,000 RPM, while still keeping some ground down low.
But at the same time, you need to ride it without fearing the clutch lever off the beaten path. You kind of have to feather it like a 2-stroke, but you get a sudden death of a 4-stroke dirt bike with that.
Sure, get it right and it's easy to handle off-road. But for someone that's just starting, it's not as forgiving as the Tenere.
But going back to basics, this is a motorcycle that's sort of glanced over. It's like people don't know about it. It's flying under the radar like a B-2 bomber.
The thing is, a lot of this might weigh a lot more if we were talking about a high-end motorcycle with a price tag to measure. But let's keep it in context here.
This serves the lower scale of the middleweight market, in the same boat with your standard Teneres, your Tuaregs and Suzukis. And when you look at it from that perspective, the sun does start to shine brighter. Because you step foot over the saddle and you forget all of these drawbacks.
Because of one simple reason. One piece of engineering that makes all the bad stuff go away. And one more reason for you to subscribe to the channel. Thanks.
The fuel pods. A design decision that might not please the artist inside of me, but will more than please anyone who actually takes these bikes out for a spin. It moves the center of gravity down low, making this motorcycle super nimble.
It should weigh over 200 kilos, yet it never feels like it.
Doing this allowed the Austrian engineers to move some things around, and by doing so, they came with the lowest seat height of any adventure bike I've ever tried.
If you're under 6 foot or 180 centimeters, as I obviously am, this feels like nirvana.
The amount of confidence you get from being able to easily dab, to not worry about putting a foot out just to reach air instead of soil, this is a feeling that can excuse any suspension shortcomings.
I've been saying it for years now, seat height matters a lot for a big number of people, and I was starting to lose hope. I wish they would have engineered my ergonomics too and make myself a little taller. As most adventure bikes are, this one is fairly tall.
And I did struggle to do that, since it's by far the tallest motorcycle I own. Every single bike I rode, from Ducatis to Yamahas, old and new, they all felt tall.
Like the only guys riding them would be pros and basketball players. But this 790 changed that. I think people strongly underestimate the importance of having accessible ergonomics, and the Austrians nailed it.
Wait, do you hear that? It's an angry internet mob with their pitchforks saying that this is not an Austrian bike? Well, it was going to come up sooner or later, wasn't it?
So, yes. This motorcycle is manufactured in collaboration with CF Moto in China.
The parts have never seen the matic of an assembly line, and I get why that's a concern.
From my point of view, the build quality is pretty darn good. And it's a bike designed by KTM, not by CF Moto. They just help assemble it.
I realize this also raises questions about reliability, which... Look, this bike had 4 kilometers on the clock when I picked it up, so I can't say much about it. I guess only time will tell.
I don't think its provenance will be an issue in the long run, I mean, heck, our iPhones are designed in the West, but manufactured in the East, and we don't seem to complain much, do we? Plus, if we're honest, a lot of parts already came from that part of the world.
Seeing and writing this in first person, you wouldn't know it wasn't made in the land of the worst. And I do hope this statement will age more like fine wine rather than milk. I mentioned earlier that it's hard to fall in love with the 790. It's not as characterful as a Ducati Multistrada, for example. It hasn't got the best suspension, it hasn't got the best engine, nor the absolute best brakes.
But crucially, it doesn't really lack anything either. There is no big omission, and that's actually kind of rare.
And for once, when talking about a KTM, it's super competitively priced. In my part of the world, standard, this comes out slightly less than a Tenere 700.
And a lot of dealers actually add in the tech pack as a gift too, which I'd argue is a non-negotiable item when looking at a 790, but even if not, this used to be Yamaha's territory, but they're not alone anymore.
If I go back less than a year ago when I rode the Tenere, I look at the criticism I gave it. That bike doesn't have tubeless tires, nor cruise control. You couldn't disable the ABS on the fly. The wind protection was mediocre, the throttle response was a bit choked at times by Euro 5.
Now, if I turn my head to the direction of the KTM, you get all of it.
You get the tubeless tires, the cruise control, you even get illuminated buttons, a steering dampener, off-road ABS that you can actually switch on or off without stopping like an idiot every single time. You get an incredibly smooth throttle. This is Euro 5 done right.
And it's funny, because the engine is based off the old 790, so it's not a radical new concept. And at the fuel range, I could get almost 300 to 400 kilometers from the 20-liter tank. And all this for roughly the price of a Yamaha.
If the 790 was a girl, she wouldn't be the cliché fall in love at first sight movie fantasy. But she would be the nice girl at school sitting next to you. Not the prettiest, not the best cheerleader, not the loudest. But the more time you spend with her, the more you start to appreciate her. To see that she really is a complete package.
I honestly think that this 790 is so good that it will take some sales from KTM's own base 890. Sure, it's not as good, but for the price, it's hard to argue against it.
And even more, a few years ago when Yamaha launched its Tenere and KTM did the same with the original 790, the Austrian one was a more performant machine. But there were three types of people that ended up with a blue bike. For those that want a bare-bones motorcycle,
one that's as reliable as taxis and that will outlive the rats after the apocalypse, yeah, those people should still get a Yamaha. For those who just can't stand the politics of Chinese-made bikes, again, fair to you, the Tenere is still your choice.
But there was a really large group of people that loved the old 790, but just couldn't justify the price. Well, now, all those people have a really good reason to go back to orange.
And that's how you really fall in love with the 790. For most of us, this bike is more than enough. And now, for a lot of us, it's way more attainable. I never thought I would say this about a KTM, but in a world where everything is getting more and more expensive,
where you're constantly getting less for more, the 790 is a breath of fresh air, in a way. Wow, I never thought I'd say this about an Austrian bike.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to also check the video on its competitor, the Yamaha Tenere 700. This bike was provided to me by ATH MOTO as a loaner, but no financial incentives were ever exchanged, nor did they have any editorial input. They are seeing this video at the same time as you do. Until next time, have a good one.